Welcome to the New England Vintage Electronics Club first Zoom of 2021. So let the record show it is January 7th, Thursday evening. And great to have you all back after our lengthy layoff. Hopefully you got some R&R and maybe some time to work on some long overdue projects and maybe even got some type of goodies from Santa for your electronic bags. So in any event, we are here this evening, and we have some guests with us. No surprise, if you look around the group in the Zoom gallery. So, one night I was, monitoring the lake shift. Like Joe Friday for the LAPD. It was dark in Los Angeles as I work nights, and happened to come across an interesting book that I thought was pretty cool at the time and still do. So it was written by a fellow named Ron Negra, who's joined us this evening. And it concerns his mom and goes back to a topic we explored a little bit with Lisa Spahr when she joined us with the discussion of her book, Letters of Compassion, Radio Heroes of World War II. So this involves Ron's mom, who is 101 years young and is still here to tell her stories to him so that he can document these things. And, she was a shortwave listener engaged in that noble task of listening in to the foreign broadcasts and then relaying information to loved ones here back in the States as far as the status of their relatives. So, I mean, it's a great story, and I was kind of surprised in that I was never really familiar with this aspect of the hobby. I certainly look at a radio like a lot of us, and I think of maybe FDR coming through the speaker, or a Ted Williams home run, or Wilkie wins, and you wonder about the different things that, the radio has experienced in its day as you listen in today. And, I certainly was familiar with the programming aspect and all the great old time radio shows and news in shortwave from overseas during the war, especially, but never really was familiar with this theme of folks here in the States who were using their own equipment to do what they could do on the home front to help keep folks informed as far as the status of their loved ones. And this is in a world where, people were still writing letters and phone calls were rare and TV non-existent. The internet, obviously, just a glint in somebody's eye, maybe, at the time. So it was really, World War II was a radio event, as the 30s were a radio decade. So, here we are, and Ron is going to share some stories tonight with us about his mom and what prompted him to write this book, and tell us a little bit about her life. As it turns out, she was a girl from Boston, which just makes this all the more topical for us. And I guess she was quite the listener of radio, Ron. And I mean, little did you know. I mean, when did she finally kind of start telling you about her activities, with shortwave? And maybe you could just give us a little of her background as well.
Sure.
What brought her to be interested in the first place to even get on and listen to shortwave?
Sure. Well, as you know, that was the radio generation. But it was kind of a surprise for me, and I think partially for her. I was starting to clean out some things. My mother is a great saver, but an organized saver. She's not a hoarder. So everything is filed, everything is boxed with labels on it and all that. And I was up in her attic. She's still in her own home, original home, and not original, but 46-year-old home that she built, my dad. And I found a box that was all taped up and it said 1946 on it. So I said, Mom, what's this all about? And she said, oh, they're the letters in there that I got back from the POW families. I said, okay, Mom, start from the beginning because I have no idea what you're talking about. She never, ever discussed this at all. So I opened up the box, and sure enough, there were over 200 letters that were written to her in response to letters that she had written to POW families during World War II, 43 and 44. And I said, Mom, just, tell me how this all came about. She said, well, my dad and his two other brothers were in combat in the European theater. And her two brothers, one was in the Pacific as in Navy espionage, actually, in China. And the other brother was in the Merchant Marine. So she said, a World War II veteran, an elderly man that lived down the street, came up one day and said to her, I know you have brothers and brother-in-laws in the service, and I know one is missing in action. Radio Berlin, I understand, is starting to make announcements about the names and addresses of some of the prisoners of war, mostly flyers, American flyers. And she said, all right, how do I get access this kind of thing? And she was so anxious because my dad was missing in action at one point as well and wounded. She was so anxious to figure out how to listen to this Radio Berlin that the World War I veteran bought her a Philco radio/shortwave/record player. And he showed her, he gave her a 10-minute training session on how to listen to the shortwave radio. And she learned that every Wednesday night, not every Wednesday night, every night at 6 o'clock. Originally, it was every Wednesday night. Every night at 6 o'clock, there was so much pressure put on the German government to release some names of the prisoners, all flyers or flying crews, that she would dial in on her shortwave radio, and a name would come on, and she would hear Joe Smith, Wichita, Kansas. She would get pen and paper, and she would write a letter to the family of Joe Smith, Wichita, Kansas. Back in those days, and I don't mean to demean anyone if you were a mail carrier or involved with the post office, back in those days, the post people really were exceptional. I mean, they found Joe Smith's family in Wichita, Kansas, and they delivered the letter. And her letter basically said, I heard the name of your loved one on my shortwave radio, and number one, he's alive, and number two, he's a prisoner of war. So the letters, people were so responded, which surprised her. She never thought she would ever hear from anybody. The letters came back to her either in postcards or in letter form, giving a little background of their loved one. My husband is a captain pilot on a B-17 bomber. They called him Fortress, I guess, back then. And I was so happy to get your letter because he was missing in action, but your letter confirmed that he's alive and he's a prisoner of war. Now, some of the letters came back and said, we're aware that my son is a prisoner of war. Other letters said, we did not know the disposition. We were hoping that he was alive because we heard a few months before that he was a POW or that his plane was shot down. And the War Department, in its own way, I guess, I'm sure they were caring, but the numbers they were dealing with were astronomical. The War Department, most of these people had, or some of them had postcards or telegrams that said, so-and-so is missing in action. And that's all they knew. So my mother's, the emotions, anyway, so I opened up this box. And first I thought they were my father's love letters. So I was reluctant to take a look at them, but she explained, what they were. And she hadn't looked at them since 1946, which kind of shocked me, but these were put away and not really discussed. And I started reading some of the letters with her, and I was really kind of gripped by the emotion of the letters. And I said, Mom, this is such a story that's fantastic. I wish I opened that box 20 years before, because a lot of these folks, not so much the family, but the POWs that made it back would still be alive. So I read the letters, and I got caught up in the passion of the emotions. And the emotions were everything from anxiety to fear to hope and faith. And most got back to my mother with a sense of gratitude that she gave them the opportunity to have faith and hope that they'd see their loved ones again. And I started interviewing my mother. I said, I can tell you, and I'm not bragging here, but my mother has never told a lie, not even a white lie. I used to try to get her to lie for me when I was in school, and she wouldn't do it. But she can never tell a lie. I mean, just never. So I said, Mom, I want this to be factual. And I started taking notes, but I never told her I was going to put it into a story for a book because I didn't think I was going to write a book. Anyway, I took all these notes, and I was intrigued by her description of this Philco, and I have the thing here. The first thing I was intrigued by was how she learned that Pearl Harbor was bombed. They had dinner every Sunday, my father and his three brothers. My dad was the only one married at the time, and then his older brother got married. But they would retire from the dining room. My grandparents had this big formal house, and they would go into the living room and listen to their Philco radio, to sports. And she said that they had the radio on, and the New York Giants Brooklyn Dodger football game was on. And I said, Mom, and my mother's memory is phenomenal, so I never challenged her, but I did. I said, Mom, the Brooklyn Dodgers, they were a baseball team. They weren't a football team. She said, Ron, they were a football team. for a short time, not a real long time. Well, anyway, that's how they heard about Pearl Harbor. They interrupted the game for about 2 minutes, and the announcer came on and he said, "We have a bulletin here. Pearl Harbor has been bombed." And then he went right back to the football game, which astonished them because, he said a lot of lives were lost, that kind of thing, maybe lost. And they were really shocked. Half of them didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, and that wasn't because of their ignorance. People just didn't discuss Pearl Harbor if you had no Navy connection or you weren't traveling to Hawaii. But that was the first experience she had, really thinking that the radio was a tremendous force in communication. And they didn't hear anything about Pearl Harbor until after the game. Then they came back on, and we actually heard that broadcast live recently at the New Jersey.
We were, a friend of mine.
You know what? I'm going to stop you one moment because we didn't introduce Val. So
Okay.
Sorry.
obviously you've gathered Ron Negra is the gentleman filling us in on his story here. This is his the best art teacher in the world, retired. And his publicity director, his wife
That's
Val,
right.
who was kind enough to email me, after I sent Lisa a link to Ron's book saying, "Hey, you guys have a little bit in common, and did you know, this was published out there?" And then shortly after, I guess Lisa and Val got in touch, I got a nice email from Val, kind of telling me a little bit about the book, showing me a fantastic picture of Ron's mom at her 101st birthday party, and also telling me she just wants to get the story circulated. She's not looking to make money. So obviously, had the best intentions in promoting her husband's book. So anyway, we'll kind of let you go back to it. Do you still have the Philco, or do you just have what the Philco was? You have
I have a picture, but I don't have the.
Wait,
I don't
I
have
know.
the.
Philco, I'll tell you.
This is the picture of Ron and his sister
Wow,
In
in
front of the photo.
Philco. Okay.
that's
So,
awesome.
these are the type of guys who look at that picture and, eventually we'll figure out what it is. I
Well,
don't know.
this picture's in the book. And what happened was one of my art teacher friends, just kind of patched into Facebook one day, and she said, "You need to go to the Radio Technology Museum in Wall Township, New Jersey." I was like, I didn't even know there was a radio technology museum. So off we went. I called, and I met this wonderful man whose name is Ray Chase, and he was our guide. And off we went, and it was wonderful. And before we came, he ordered the book, read the book. He said, "I love the book, and we're gonna find out what radio this is for you." So we went there, and he found out, Ron, that it's a
Philco model 41-629P, a 1940 model, and he said it was sold probably in 1941. So it was brand new. This World War I veteran gave my mother a brand new radio /
right. Right. And
microwave.
Yeah, Ray said he was intrigued because he said that he thought she was very lucky to be able to get that, because the ham radio operators, they were taking away the shortwave radio capabilities because they were afraid of messages going to Germany.
Interesting.
But the radio listeners, I guess, were allowed to still keep it because she was just listening. So he said to me, "Wow," he goes, "I can't believe they didn't, confiscate that radio from your mother-in-law." And I said, "No," and obviously, as I learned from Lisa, because what happened was Paul emailed me and said, "Oh, by the way, I told this lady, Lisa Spahr, about you." And Lisa was on the other side of the coin of us, as you guys all know. So Lisa contacted me, and I was able to find out, much more about the radio listeners, as they're called, from her. And we've been having a dialogue back and forth. And
So I'm just going to, not to interrupt you, Val, but just to interject here. Now, for those of you folks who either may be members of the Jersey Club as well as us, or have ever visited with any of the Jersey guys, they maintain a presence. They have an actual room at a facility called InfoAge down in New Jersey. Now, apparently this is also the home of one of the Marconi Company's sites, which, how cool could that be? So they're down there in their job, in their section, in their booth, so to speak, in InfoAge, is to obviously promote, the history technical developments in the world of radio and communication. So that's radio, that may be television, but they have these user-friendly exhibits. And again, they're down there preaching the radio gospel to anybody who comes through. So it's just kind of ironic that you guys should wander in there. And I did speak to Rich Lee, who was hoping to join us. He's the president down in New Jersey, but he may have had some other obligations tonight. But I believe you'll be meeting with them as well. So, and the other thing that we need to think of too is now, Ron, if I understand what we've talked about a little bit. So your mom basically is at this point, she's, during a lot of this listening, she's a young, newly married woman whose husband is off fighting. And, she is not sort of the typical profile of a shortwave radio geek, as we know and love them all. So, and here she is now, she's going to take on this role as listener and reporter, and off she goes. She worked a little bit more independently. A lot of the folks that Lisa discussed in her books and chatted with us, when she was with us earlier, we're working in these groups and informal groups and clubs with schedules. And, it was a pretty evolved effort as far as trying to make sure people were listening, at certain nights and certain bands were being covered. And, it was a shared responsibility. Your mom was kind of a lone operator here, wasn't she?
Well, she was. She was a new mother. My sister was born in August 42. That's when my dad was delayed going in for a couple of reasons. One is that his wife was pregnant. And the second thing was he enlisted in the Navy, but was knocked out because he was colorblind. And he also had malaria when he was 18 years old and never really thought twice about it. So his blood work came back with that. So he was able to be home a little while longer after my mother gave birth, and he was going to stay until after she gave birth anyway. And he was working in a defense plant. So the Army wasn't bothering him. And but he grew very weary because all of his buddies were gone. And after my mother and her daughter, my sister got up on her feet a little bit, Dad enlisted in the Army. And it was interesting because my mother had a full schedule. She did this as a Lone Ranger kind of thing because I did find recently a letter from a woman that said she was part of an organization. And Lisa, you're probably up on this. I'll have to get the name for you. Mm-hmm. And she wanted my mother to join this shortwave / radio organization. I think the letter said she had 30 members or something like that of people that were doing what my mother was doing.
Yeah, the Shortwave Amateur Monitor Club.
Does that make sense, Lisa? Are you familiar with that?
It does. Was her name Ruby Yant? YA?
We're not sure, but I'll look it up for you.
We're gonna check it out. We'll check it out.
She was the organizer of that club out of Lima, Ohio.
It was Ohio. I know that. Okay.
So it had to be. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, my mother listened intently every night, and she wrote as many letters as she could. And like I said, it was surprising that she got so many responses back. Very, very nicely written from people and showing their gratitude. And my mom did this hoping that she would hear my father's brother's name, who was a gunner in a B-17 and shot down over Yugoslavia on his 29th mission in November 44. She was really hoping every night that his name would come true because the family was told that he was shot down and captured in a POW. When in fact, he was captured, was rescued by the Yugoslavian underground and lived in barns and fields in Yugoslavia for the next year. But she never heard his name. And that was the disappointing part because that would have at least signaled to the family that he was alive. So she did this for as long as she could. And she got great gratitude and great appreciation from it. But she said, Ron, it got to a point where she felt obligated. Her brothers weren't married and they were away, that she needed to write to them quite a bit, as well as my dad. My dad ended up then really rescued by the Belgian underground after he was wounded and just left for dead. They hit him out and then got him to a newly liberated northern France hospital where he spent 44 days. And that's an interesting story too. I don't mean to digress too much.
Ron, it's a fascinating story. Now, I was just curious. So did he wind up getting somehow, in hopes of getting him shipped out, did he wind up with the Yugoslavs after he was released from the hospital, or was that as he was making his, what was he going north or south? Do you know?
No, my dad was released from the hospital and put back in action in France. He was in there 44 days.
Gee,
It was his
thanks.
brother. It was his brother that was released by the Yugoslavians. The
Fascinating.
underground. My father was the Belgian underground. Thank God for these
Okay.
undergrounds, you know.
Well, the partisans were, I mean, they were huge and effective. And, you know, as Tom gave us, we had a great presentation. You might want to check it out a little bit on the Nevik YouTube site. Great talk on spy radios. And of course, obviously, you know, that's something that really came to its apex, you know, at the times and during World War II. But, you know, fascinating stuff on how these guys would disguise radios, hide radios, smuggle radios, set up stations. And obviously the partisans and the resistance, you know, were in communication with, you know, various components of the Allied forces. And I mean, it's cloak and dagger, it's seat of your pants. It's amazing stuff that, you know, many of these people who were, you know, just, you know, average Joes and Janes before the war, you know, rose up to do and to help
Yeah,
all the
well,
downed servicemen and captured servicemen. It's a great story. And, you know, he showed up because he heard me talking about him. Hi, Rich Lee.
Hi, Paul. Nice to see you guys.
No, you know what? So this is, you know, we just finished having me give an anemic explanation of what InfoAge is all about, and then your name pops up on the screen. So if I can, I'm gonna pause Ron and Val for a minute.
Sure.
And now they apparently had met Ray Chase down at InfoAge, and he had kindly helped them actually identify the Philco that Ron's mom was using to monitor these shortwave prisoner broadcasts. Maybe you could just give us a short little blurb, better than mine, on what InfoAge really is.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, obviously you've met Ray Chase. He's the curator of our RTM, Radio Technology Museum of the New Jersey Antique Radio Club, which is within the umbrella organization of InfoAge. We'll call it Science and Learning Center. They keep changing their moniker, but that's basically what it is. And it's a group of museums and organizations that got together in the mid to late 90s when Camp Evans was decommissioned and given over from the Army and given over to the town of Wall in New Jersey. Then it was made available to organizations that wanted to take it over and make it, well, they wanted to restore the buildings, make it into what it was, but they realized that was impossible under the circumstances. And so they brought in us as different organizations and clubs and museums. And we've been able to prosper ever since then. For seat of the pants a lot of times, of course, and of course the pandemic hasn't helped many things either. But in a nutshell, it's, we have about, right now we have about 11 organizations under the umbrella, from computer festivals to I call it choo-choo train organizations. We've got, like I said, our Radio Technology Museum, of course, which is the most popular. I'll have to say that. And you know, we're designated by the state of New Jersey, and I believe also federally, that we are a group of organizations and museums that have to be open 3 days a week with docents. So we are open on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays between the hours of 1 and 5. And so along the way, you folks have joined us either on a Saturday or Sunday. I can go on and on and on, but I think that covers it right now, Paul.
Now, Rich, is that close to, or is there a Marconi link to the site down there?
Well, yes, I'm afraid I left that out. It's true. Well, the address is 2201 Marconi Road.
Oh, there we go.
In 1914, the Marconi Hotel and the area that's known as Shark River there was a building built by Marconi and his organization, who was transmitting and testing from that site. It's near Belmar, New Jersey. It's right along the Atlantic Ocean. And the buildings there still exist from 1914, all construction of concrete and tile. It looks very European. And we have undertaken so many of us, the actual hands-on restorations of those buildings, certainly in the beginning. Please, visit the website, infoage.org, and you'll get some more of the history of it. But
If I can say, Rich,
yes,
Ron and I were absolutely blown away by our visit to the museums. Ray took us on a tour. We had no idea what we were going to find there. And I'm telling you, for days afterwards, we just kept looking at one another saying, I can't believe what they have there. It's like incredible.
And no one knows. I mean, we've asked people. No one
Ray,
knows.
Ron was just telling a story about his mom and dad listening to a broadcast on the day of Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor. And Ray said to us, oh, come into the living room. And we walk into this one room that's set up like a living room. Doilies are on the table, lamps are lit, the radio is there. And he said, would you like to hear the broadcast? And we were like, yes, absolutely. And he turns on the broadcast. Now, remember what Ron said about the football game. And they actually announced exactly on that broadcast what his mother had told him and what Ron had put in the book, Waves of Hope. It was so
Cool.
spooky because
That is spooky.
he validated every single thing that his mom had told him. And there we are sitting in this living room listening to the actual broadcast. It was just unbelievable.
Was my grandfather there with a cheap
better.
cigar and a T-shirt? Because then it would really be just like the old.
Probably.
Your grandfather would have felt very comfortable there, would have been home.
So Rich, it was great. It was
Yeah,
fabulous.
great job.
well, you folks are, you do know you are scheduled to be with us in
Yes.
April at our April meeting.
Yes.
And something like you said, you didn't know. Well, I got news for you. There are people within the environs of what was called Camp Evans at the time that do not know it existed. They don't know what's within InfoAge for the last 20 years now. It's always amazing to us when someone comes over and discovers it, and they happen to live maybe 4 or 5 miles away, and they didn't know that this existed. They thought it still was an old derelict army camp.
Yeah, and
So,
Ray was fantastic. He got so excited about the book. He was like, oh my God, I have to get this book immediately. And he ordered the book and he's writing a review of it. And he called in all, these other guys that were there. And he's like, oh, he's ordering the book and he ordered the book.
Guys like you.
Yeah,
You
he
know.
was so excited about it. I mean, it was just, it was so heartwarming to know that, Ron had spent all this time interviewing his mother, writing the whole story, putting all the letters in. And now we actually got to hear someone who was on the other side of it that was appreciating it and, thought that it was great that we were getting the word out there.
Well, that also goes to show what a nice job those guys do down there because, you're kind of coming into this through another door. You're not really what we would say, radio enthusiasts as much as other than, you might like to listen to a radio. But for the folks who devote all of this time and effort to the exhibits and putting their time in and meeting the clubs and the groups and the Boy Scouts and all of that, it's nice when somebody can have such a positive experience down there. And it is a little spooky. You got to hear the broadcast you were looking
And
for.
it's amazing.
That's exactly what my mother said.
This is a part of history that I never knew about. I don't think Ron knew about it either. These, radio listeners. And as I said about getting the word out, I think it's important that people nowadays know that there were actually people back there doing this. This was very important work, and no one
it's
really.
another aspect
You've
of the
got
home
no
front.
video.
We hear about
Leave it
rationing
alone.
and we hear about drives for scrap metal and paper and food
Basically,
and this.
correct.
And this is great. So, that you can get this angle on it. Now, Ron, if we can just back up a little bit and after Rich gave us his intro there, tell us a little bit about your dad's experience as far as being downed and then picked up by the Belgian resistance.
Yeah, his platoon was
The
pretty
thing is,
well.
the whole thing is shot because you still don't have any.
Well, I
Still
think we
don't have any
have,
hope.
I think we have
Got
some,
that squared away.
there you go, John. Thank you.
Okay.
Our capable
His
controller.
whole platoon was wiped out except for one other GI and left. there was no one there. I guess my father was moaning, and the underground, Belgian underground, wonderful people, because we got to get with them and talk to them. A brother and a cousin wandered by and heard my father and heard the other wounded GI, and got them to their home in Belgium, where they were hidden out because Belgium was supposed to be a neutral country, but it was occupied by the Nazis, and families took a big risk bringing them in. The family was exceptional. My parents kept in contact with them until everyone passed. But they kept my father there for weeks and then got him filtered back into northeastern France, which had been liberated, into the 95th American Hospital. It was a field hospital. My dad was there 44 days. And this is the fun part of the story, I guess. I took French in high school, my junior and senior year, and there was a teacher there by the name of Miss Gerdnick, who was as old as the hills. And I walked in the first day and she said, hello, Mr. Negra, like she knew me. And, I didn't think anything of it. And my father never said a word to me. Well, Miss Gerdnick was my father's French teacher when he was in the same high school, Nutley High School. And she developed this relationship with him. She liked him a lot, and he was fluent in French. He loved the language, which helped him in Belgium, by the way. And I talked to my mother about it. She said, oh yeah, Miss Gerdnick is the one. She said, the way I found out about Dad being in that hospital for 44 days was a French nurse wrote my mother a letter to tell her that my dad was alive and that he was, they were nursing his wounds or bringing him back or whatever. He had back surgeries. And she said, I didn't know what to do when I got the letter. It was all in French. So I brought it to your dad's French teacher, Miss Gerdnick, at the high school, and she translated the letter for me. So that's how my mother found out my father was alive.
That's pretty neat.
It was quite
well, everybody was looking to help everybody else in any event. So,
phenomenal. But no one talked about these things. No one really talked about.
Well, they just did it because it was expected of them, and that's what they thought they had to do. And that's a recurring theme, whether it's the shortwave listening program or whether it's, folks who sacrifice to help out, a widow or an orphan or people who are up against it because their sons weren't able to help support them. I mean, that's the 40s, that's the early 40s. So
that's right.
That's pretty neat. So now tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, not to say we're going to get off on war tales of World War II here. So your dad was assisted by the Belgians. What did you know about what you said it was your uncle who was assisted by the Yugoslavs?
He was rescued by the Yugoslavian resistance out of a German camp, POW camp.
Amazing.
He was only in it a short time. And he was then hidden out in barns all throughout Yugoslavia. And whenever the Nazis came close to finding him, they would move him somewhere else. I mean, these people they risked their lives for him.
Yeah. I mean, just, you're talking about moving a prisoner. Now, when Tom was speaking to us a little bit about the spy radio program, if you were just caught and suspected of any type of collaboration, and you had a radio that obviously was more than something you would just listen to your weekly Mozart concert on, you were up against the wall, basically, at that point, and you had some information to give, and you better give it, and probably not the greatest fate awaiting you. But, from what I understand, just from my own reading and from some of the things I have heard from different people, routinely partisans in different parts of Europe, if they were familiar of activity with Allies and Germans, would, after things simmered down and if they retreated or, the battlefield was cleared, so to speak, and they moved on, it was a very mobile war in some parts of Europe, these guys and gals would go and look around precisely for people in your dad's situation. Noises, moans, groans, cries, screams, roll people over. I mean, that's not the nicest thing to have to do, because I'm sure they found a lot more folks who were beyond their assistance than they were able to help. But talk about just a whole other aspect of this whole thing going on in Europe. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. So anyway, so your mom was doing this as a young wife, husband away. When did she find out your dad was okay?
1945. I'm trying to remember. March. No.
I know she heard from the nurse, but when did she find out he'd be returning as well? Was that something she knew of, or did he just show up?
Yeah, he got back in 46. She found out in late 1945 that he had been put into a unit. And I don't know much about that, to be honest with you. I'll have to dig into that. And then he stayed in France until he was then moved over into England and then shipped back. So he got back in 1946. I think it was March of 46. He came back to Camp Blanding in Maryland. And that's where he was discharged out of. But he
What
went
did he
through,
do what did he do later in his life, Ron? Just out of curiosity, after he
believe it or not,
simmered down.
he came back and he was the baby of 4 brothers, and they all survived, by the way, in the war. He wanted to go to college, and his father was able to do that, but the older guy got everything, I guess. So he was playing softball. He was working for a small company playing softball, and the chief of police came in the door in the bar they were in after the game, and he said, I have the opportunity to put 14 patrolmen on our police department. And he looked at my father and he said, I want you to take the civil service test. And my father fought it, but he did with all his buddies. Came out first, and he was appointed to the police department in 1947, the late 46, 47, I think it was. And he became a policeman. He retired as a captain, chief of detectives, that kind of thing.
Well, with all that, military experience and the like, veterans, even today, you find a lot of folks in the police world who served overseas, MPs, or have some relevant experience. So now, did your mom know you were writing this book as you were putting it together and making all these notes, or was this one of these things where you just looked like an interested guy, and then one day you said, "Hey, what do you think of this?"
Yeah. She didn't know. I would sit in front of her and take some notes and go out to my car and then expand on the notes based on what she told me. And my objective was to write this into a story, because I felt like it was something that she would enjoy reading. And she still has, she's the 6th child of 11 children. Okay, so she's 101, and there's still 3 other siblings left. They're all in their 90s.
Wow.
No one ever leaves us in her family. They all go into the high 90s. My mother turned out to be the oldest. And that's because my grandfather was a commercial fisherman. And they ate fish. That was their diet. In Boston and Gloucester, Mass. That's where they ate the fish. And my mother swears that the fishes would kept them alive all these years. But anyway, yeah, I did it for her 100th birthday. I decided to write a short story, simple, that she would enjoy reading. And I wanted to present it to her. So I went to a printer, and the printer did the book for me. Put it in a binding and said, "This should be a book, Ron. You're wasting your time here." And I said, "Nah, that's okay." So I gave it to her. We gave it to her on her 100th birthday. And many people that were there came up to me and said, "That's a great story, Ron. You need to do something with it." And I still didn't want to get it published. It was her private life too. I didn't know if that was plausible. So we were sitting on the beach that winter, and Val happened to be sitting next to a lady that we've known for years. And she said, "What's Ron up to these days that he retired?" And Val said, "Well, he wrote a book." And she said, "What's it about?" And Val explained it to her, and she said, "I have a friend that's a publisher that would be intrigued by this story. This is a great story. Should be a movie, all that stuff." And she contacted the woman. The woman asked for a manuscript, and we're published.
The rest is she got it, and she called us the same day. She said, "I just got your book. I sat down. I couldn't put it down. This needs to be published." We were like, "Okay."
That's awesome.
But, so Ron set the table so nicely for me, because my next comment was going to be, so when our Val and Ron and Lisa Spahr are going to fly out to Hollywood and get this project going.
Very soon. So we developed a relationship with the publisher. We worked with her, as you can imagine, for a very long time, months and months, trying to tweak this, put this picture in, do this, do that. And she got to know us very well. And so the book was released, and we had to do a few things afterwards. And I wrote to her, and she wrote me back, and she said, "I couldn't email you right away, Val, because I was out shopping for my gown for the red carpet, so that after Clint Eastwood makes your movie, I'll have something nice to wear."
I love it. Now, interestingly enough, I mean, just as an aside, I mean, certainly, obviously, Hollywood is Hollywood, but there are, in some cases, I'm familiar. We have a school up here that's noted primarily for musical appreciation and for budding writers and artists. Berkeley Conservatory. We have a member of our club whose son attended Berkeley. He went there for film, and is a sort of so maybe in the world, you see these independent film festivals, and you occasionally see somebody who's looking for a different story, something that isn't part 17 of a movie made in 1975 that somebody might be interested in. Not to knock sequels. Somebody who's looking for a different idea, who doesn't have a huge budget, who'd be willing to work with you guys for some cooperation and contribution. So
Yeah, I think
I mean, you better get ready, you might be starring in your own film, you guys. You better
listen, I
look your best.
I don't care about starring. I really think that, it's my goal to get as many people to read this story as possible, because I think it's, another author wrote to me this week and she said it's a part of history that's not in the history books, but it needs to be told. People need to know about it. It's not something that they're teaching in school that you're going to read about in a history book.
Yes.
But yet,
Well,
isn't it wonderful to know it?
Those folks die from the greatest generation who perhaps grew up in the 30s and then fought the war in the 40s and then built the country in the 50s, are fading. Interest in, when it's your great grandfather or you have an interest, it's right in front of you. But as we start to lose those folks, you're right, it's something that starts to fade. So now, Lisa, I just have to ask you on your, what did you think of this whole thing? Were you surprised when you found out that these folks in New Jersey had such a similar story? Because I know in many cases, as you continue to uncover things with your own story from that box you found in your attic or in your relative's attic, some things are similar, some things are different. But were you surprised that somebody else had run that far with the ball?
I was delighted, surprised and delighted. And it's so refreshing to hear someone else, take the stage and grab the mic and tell the story that is so similar to our own with my grandfather. It's wonderful. And I'm thrilled that we'll have more people talking about the heroes of World War II and the radio heroes specifically. I was thrilled. I was so excited to order my book. I've got it. I was so excited to get this, and we've talked. Val and I have talked a lot via email. I will seek congressional recognition and presidential recognition again. I want to wait a couple of months after the inauguration, and I'll go after that. And now I have even more ammunition, if you will, to present. So I'll plan to pick up some more books so that when I'm sending those packages out, I'm not just sending my book, I'm sending their book now too, to show that this story is deep, it's rich, it's being told by more people over and over. And not everyone has the time or the story to put together a book, right, to present it. But we know that there are so many people out there that are finding these treasures. And we know, and we've documented over 300 people that took part in this. So the story will be told. It's events like this, and it's you sending me that information, which really spurred me getting to know Ron and Val. And there's a woman in Washington that's writing a play loosely based on my book and on this story. And so we're getting these wonderful things done. And it's really exciting, really refreshing. And hearing them talk, I mean, more of the story is similar than is not. And
Yes.
Yes.
I have
Now,
my
the other thing that,
radio heroes here.
There's the plug, Paul.
there we go.
I just
The
have
Mutual
to,
Admiration Society is just
so
rolling
real
here
quick,
tonight, huh?
we didn't
No.
know Lisa from a hole in the wall, but we started chatting and I got the book, and as soon as I got it, I started reading it, and I could not put it down. I read it from cover to cover, and I'm reading even the list of radio listeners in the back. I'm reading every
Right.
person's name,
And
what
you
state they
and
And-
Valerie discovered somebody she knows who is a listener.
It was unbelievable. I'm reading and I see Nicholas Oriolo, Union City, New Jersey.
North
And
Bergen,
and I yelled to Ron, oh my God, this is our dear friend Nick's. I go, Nick's father is in Lisa's book. So I quick called up Nick and he goes, yeah, my father used to do that. He told us about that. So now, as fate would have it, Lisa redid her list now because she wanted to include mom, Agnes Negra, in there. And she just sent me the new list. And believe it or not, it's Agnes Joan Negra is number 159. And our friend's father, Nicholas Oriolo, is number 160. I mean, talk about, is that coincidence or is it fate, Lisa?
Godwin.
No, it's amazing, isn't it? And Kauskas out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he kept them all those years. And then when I was writing this book and interviewing him many years ago now, he sent me boxes and boxes of materials. And that's how I was able to collect and review Ruby Yant's documentation from 1943.
So
Now,
are you guys going to come to Hollywood with us when we go with Lisa?
Yeah, well.
Paul, can I just speak up? One takeaway, walking out of the Wall Township museum, and I was looking at all the guys in there, and they're all like you guys, okay? They're all from approximately your generation, maybe a few older. And my takeaway was, what's going to happen to all of this? And I went back in and I asked the question. I said, guys, tell me the truth. Are there any young people involved in this? Are they interested in any way? What is going to happen with the history that you guys have really?
Well, not as many as we'd like, but hopefully there'll be a few. I mean, I think, I'm not a spokesman for all the radio clubs in America, but I know that's a continuous challenge that a lot of us face as far as how to interest and hopefully encourage, people of younger ages to get involved. Now, just from my own perspective, where I work the gate at some of our events and collect money and say hello and write the name tags, I would say in the last 2 or 3 years in New England, I have seen far more people, I'd say under 50 years old. I've seen some people come with their kids. So there's a little flicker of hope there on the horizon, but it's a challenge all of us, deal with. And many people who've amassed great collections of sets and have, very rare equipment, historically significant equipment, whether it's, radio or telegraph or television. There are some museums that are interested in this type of stuff, but, their own personal concern is what happens to it. Can I give it to a group or an organization? Should I auction it for the benefit of my heirs? Those are all issues that are always discussed amongst, folks in this hobby where it's a little bit of a graying hobby, to say the least. But just one thing to back up a little bit when we were talking about, your unique story and then it not being so unique, and especially with Lisa with the organized group, but yet you guys, your mom, Ron, was an individual doing this. I couldn't help but think how many other folks like your mom are out there doing this that we don't know about.
Sure.
As certainly we have these discoveries of different materials that lead us to find out these things, but how many people don't even think it's of interest, would throw out the letters, would throw out the radio, would not care to stop and talk to their great grandpa or grandma about what they were doing. And what a shame that would be if somehow that wasn't preserved. So one thing I would encourage us as a group to do is in our discussions with each other or with other folks we know are interested in what we do with collecting radios. And sometimes, you guys go to auctions, you find out about estates, you might meet interesting people that weren't in a club even that we know that had all this radio stuff. if anybody ever has a thread that goes back to this type of activity, send it to Lisa, send it to Ron, send it to somebody who can do something with it and maybe explore it a little bit, and maybe there'll be some other veins, in the mind, so to speak, that would help make even a better case for some future recognition for them. So we certainly have enough exposure to going into people's homes and basements and finding bags of tubes and radios and equipment and manuals and schematics. And if we ever find anything else in there, as far as any type of personal correspondence or anything concerning these types of activities, it's certainly well worth forwarding to somebody who can do a little something with it. So, well, anyway, one thing I also thought about is, we've had these discussions, but wouldn't you like to hear some of these broadcasts that were made by Tokyo Rose or Radio Berlin, if any of them were ever preserved, whether somebody here at a radio station or the government had recorded some of it and saved it? Did they ever share or do anything with that information if they did? Or would anything exist, in somebody's archives in Germany that would be transcription discs of, some of these propaganda shows that were broadcast, or did they get rid of them all? So just kind of another interesting avenue. I'd love to find some stuff out about it. If any of those recordings still actually exist, it would, much like the Pearl Harbor story, it would be kind of neat to listen to on a vintage set. So, we're almost at the 8 o'clock hour here. So I would just, at this point, ask you, Ron, if you had anything else to add, or if you'd like us to throw open the door here and take some questions from the group for either Lisa and yourself and Val, or anybody have any comments, contributions, suggestions they'd like to make?
Okay. Just one note, you got to have fun with this stuff, because otherwise you get too serious about it. One of the first people that bought the book, ordered the book from Virginia, contacted Val. And she said, "Oh, I'm going to send you a photo of the book." And she held the book up next to her, and she sent texted the picture of the Val. And we decided, wouldn't that be a fun thing to do for people that contact us? And we've got a lot of contacts with people we've never met before, i.e. Lisa. And people have said, "Hey, what can I do to participate?" And we said, "Take a picture of yourself, a selfie, and send it to us." And we decided that for my mother's 101st birthday, which was on November 13th, that we would give her a photo album with all these pictures.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's 100 and...
Well, I've been posting every day since August 29th, so figure it out.
Val posts one picture a day on Facebook, if it's approved by the person that sends us the picture. And we also put the picture in a photo album, which we presented to my mother. Val's actually working on another album now, because the pictures keep rolling in.
There were too many.
It's really incredible, the response.
Since I'm an art teacher, I kind of did lettering of what the person said about the book. So it's the picture and then what they said about it.
But getting back to what Paul said, it's interesting because the comments we're getting from people that are not the greatest generation, but people are writing to us and saying, my grandfather or my grandmother did this, that, and the other thing during World War II. We're learning, how about my grandfather was a POW, or my father was a POW. We got one of those one day. And they're telling us their stories. It's really quite interesting, So I will keep my ear open, because if any of this equipment's sitting out there anywhere, I'll let you guys know.
Now, you have a Facebook page that you use for the book, correct?
No, we have a website. It's
Okay.
ronaldedwardnegra.com. I don't have a Facebook page yet, but I'm not the greatest technical person.
But Val has a Facebook page.
But I have my own Facebook page. Val.
And I know Lisa has a Facebook page as well.
Lisa has the Facebook page. And
so easy contact you, either of you.
Yes.
Sure.
Easy contact. As I said, Ron's website, ronaldedwardnegra.com, has a spot where you can actually, Lisa did it, where you can contact him. You can write whatever you want. You could send the message in.
Order the book.
Whatever, and he'll get it. And one thing I just want to make sure to mention, and I'm sure that everybody here is on the same page with me. We wanted the website to be very patriotic about the red, white, and blue, about the flag. As a matter of fact, I have my own rating system that I came up with. Amazon calls it 5-star rating. I called Lisa's book, and of course our book, and I call it a 5 flag rating. Okay.
Nice.
Because I think that that's what it's all about. It's all about the flag. And, you know, even if you just go on the website just to see it, I think it's, you know, it's all about the red, white, and blue. And it's all about, you know, America and the flag.
Yeah, and you know there is, as I mentioned to Ron and Val. So shortly before the holidays, you know, I had thought of them. You know, obviously Ron's mom's 101, so there's a fellow in Lowell, Mass. He's 105, and he's a veteran of World War II. And you know, despite the fact that you know things are, you know, Lowell is most of Massachusetts at this point is unfortunately surging with COVID cases, and towns are labeled hotspots, and you know certainly any type of public gathering, you know, all of these things are not to be had. But so in Lowell, they arranged for him two things. One is for his 105th birthday as a esteemed citizen of Lowell, but also it's to thank him for his service. And it's nice to see, you know, a lot of guys who came out who had served in the Gulf War or Vietnam vets. You know, there were guys on motorbikes, but there were kids with mothers, and they all came by and gave this rolling birthday greeting. I mean, and he's sitting there, you know, I'm starting to tear up, you know, and it was real nice that they would do something like that. So, you know, I think in many respects, you know, when I was a kid growing up, you know, a lot of the guys who came home from Vietnam would not get much more than a sneer and maybe a nasty comment, and not thanks for anything. But amongst, you know, people of my age and a little younger, there seems to be a newfound, perhaps because their parents served in some of these more recent conflicts, and they understand a little bit more about what they gave, a little bit more of an understanding and a willingness to show some respect and to celebrate what these folks have given us. So any comments from the group for either of our guests, or for Rich Lee about InfoAge, if he's still floating around with us? Do you want to go through the group, John, or how would you
What
like
about
to do things?
Lisa's book? How could I order Lisa's book? Hello?
So Per, so
Yeah.
so I think they had Ron and Val had given their website.
Yeah, that's for their book. How
Ways
about
of Hope. Yeah,
Oh,
Lisa's.
Lisa's. Oh, you know, I can send that as an email to the group. If in fact, what I'll do,
Okay,
if
good.
people want to jot this down, I will send the website for both Lisa and Ronald and Val.
And Lisa's on Amazon, and we know that, so you can get it
So
right on
Yeah,
Amazon.com.
I can
Oh,
easily
good.
do that with it, and it's cheap PR.
Yes, it is.
That's
Oh,
right.
Val will be sending you a Christmas card next year, John, if you keep this
Hey,
up.
I
the
just
least we
went
could
to
do,
Ron's
they're
website.
honoring us
Looks
with our
great.
presence.
Who's-
Thank you. Who's
Thank
that?
you.
I'm
Who
sorry, who
said
said
that?
it?
That
John
was
Noah.
Mr. Nowatzki.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks
I'm
very
so
much.
glad. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad you like it. You know, the website designer that we work with, she's like, oh, you know, what about the, you know, we'll make it about Ron being an author. I said, you know, when we both said, no, make it about America, make it red, white, and blue, put the flag in there. That's what, you know, that's what the message of the book is all about. People helping people for the good of, you know, of the country.
Are we going to see a picture of the book?
Yes, Ron.
And how about and something inside of it as well?
All right, this is what it looks like on the cover.
And that's Agnes on the cover in her
Okay,
younger
and then
days.
this says Ron's mom and dad.
Nice.
That was Christmas Day when he shipped out of Florida for France, for England.
Okay, you can
Oh,
see
okay.
his mom
What a
in
day
the
to ship out.
circle on the cover there. You know, where that's her of the vintage of when she was writing the letters. I showed you guys the, this is Ron and his sister. She doesn't like her outfit in this picture, but this is them in front of the shortwave, you know, radio.
Philco.
Right.
Check
Now,
out.
this is an obtuse and trivial fact, but this is the type of thing that, you know, you'll get from me. So where your mom's picture appears on the cover of your book bears a very strong resemblance to sort of a very notable and famous dial escutcheon, which is what we call the outside of the dial face of many Philco radios, sort of that shadow meter effect.
Really?
So
Really?
if that wasn't done on purpose,
It
well, let me
wasn't.
tell you,
It was not.
there's a ghost in the house, okay? And
It was not. And
he was
inside
from,
the book,
his name is James Skinner.
Right. Inside the book, you'll actually see the letters, or, you know, pictures of each one of the letters is in there. But also, you know, Ron actually had it typed out so you could read it, because some of them are, are hard.
Some of the handwriting.
Some of
yeah,
the
it's
handwriting
not
is
great.
hard to read.
And generally, though, that generation, some of the writing is just beautiful. I mean, it should be
Yeah.
in cursive
Yeah.
classes.
It's interesting. They used the penny postcard. And my mother said that people were so grateful. They would send her $1 for stamps, or they would send her a bunch of postcards that she could respond back.
There's a lot, $1 is nothing to be sniffed at in those days.
No, not at all.
absolutely not. That's a lot of money.
No. And the sad part is that they would send her pictures of their loved one, of their soldier. And I have one regret, okay? And that's that I didn't do this 20 years ago, not thinking I'd even write a book about it. I wish it was 20 years ago, because I've already done research on the POWs that she wrote to. And about 50% of them came back. And they're all gone. The last one just passed away at 101 a few months ago. And his obituary said that he was from Ohio. His obituary said that he was playing golf up until the last day of his life. And I felt so bad about that, because I would have loved to have contacted him
Yeah.
and said, gee, I have your mother or your grandmother's letter that came back to my mother. But I would have loved to have sat and interviewed him. I thought that would have been really a wonderful thing to do.
One of the letters that somebody wrote back, she actually found a card. I was like so impressed with this, that said, "God bless America," with a flag on it. I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that.
sure. Sure, that's beautiful.
Unbelievable. Some of the thought that the people put into the letters that they wrote back to her. And there was one quote that is throughout the book that, was so poignant. I get goosebumps. One of the mothers of the prisoner of war wrote to Mom and said, "As long as there are Americans like you who are doing such wonderful work and giving such wonderful service to our fellow Americans, I'm sure victory will be ours, and you can be sure you and others like you have played a vital part." That's from June 21st, 1943. It sounds like a line from a movie. I mean,
I know.
it's unbelievable.
Well, those thoughts all go to that sentiment Ron expressed about the book itself and what some of these letters, meant to the folks who received them. It's hope. It's a little inspiration. It's a positive thought for the future. It's inspiring. It's what you need to get through COVID in a way, as far as, the light at the end of the tunnel. So
There's one letter in there that came from the POW that came back. And when he got back, he says in his letter that his parents showed him my mother's letter. And that gave them the hope to continue on, to think that he would be home someday. And he was thanking my mother in the letter, I included in the book, for my mother taking the time to write to his parents to give them the hope that he would return. I thought that was, this stuff is so emotional. And now you know why I started doing the book. I got so passionate over the emotions that came through on that,
Yeah, and the other thing too is, it's great to talk about, we hope they come home. And, unfortunately for a lot of families, the losses were, just the Bataan death march alone, not to mention, you add it all up between civilians and American military and merchant marine. We're talking such significant numbers of people, and yet for folks to still, the only way going is going forward. It's pretty impressive comment about that generation. So, anybody else have anything to add? Comments, questions?
Yeah, so I got
Roy.
Lisa's book when she spoke last time. She was nice enough to autograph it for me.
Oh, very nice.
And when we were vacationing in New Hampshire at Kangamangas Highway, I was reading this by the rocks with the water going by, and it was like a great day. So thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Very nice.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Ron's uncle,
Yes.
how did he get out of Yugoslavia? I just read a book it's called The Forgotten 500, about a bunch of American flyers that were actually flown out of Yugoslavia on a secret mission, and they were being harbored by Yugoslav partisans for months and months, and they flew 500 of them out of Yugoslavia. I didn't see his name listed, but it's only a partial list. I wonder how he got out of Yugoslavia.
My understanding is just how you described it. The underground of the resistance through a radio got back to the Americans, and they sent in a special plane as they gathered these prisoners, or rather the escapees, from the fields of Yugoslavia and flew them back out. I don't know the exact timeline on that, and unfortunately, he passed at age 65. His son did give me some information. I'm going to look into that though to see if I can
And
find
it's
out.
called the Forgotten 500.
That's
Okay.
Forgotten 500. What a
We'll
great,
check it
that's
out.
great. We'll check that out.
Fantastic book.
Thank you. Thank
You know,
you.
just as an observation, because you talk about Yugoslavia. So, I mean, obviously, you know, the war made a lot of people into tough people. The Yugoslavians were famously rugged and fierce in their fighting skills. Now, with you know, the Red Army advancing and occupying most, you know, they occupied my great-grandfather's homeland. They were in the Czech Republic. I mean, obviously they moved through Poland and all. The one country that the Soviets decided they did not want to try to occupy was Tito's Yugoslavia. And that was for a variety of reasons, one of which was they probably didn't doubt that they would rather die to the man and woman than let the Reds in after getting rid of the Germans. So if anybody was going to pull something off like Dave mentioned in that book, those would be the folks to do it. Anybody else have anything to throw in?
Paul, if you don't, or there is a YouTube channel that I follow religiously now. It's been on for about 4 years, and it's Mark Felton Productions and Mark Felton War Stories. And he's a Brit, he's an author, and incredibly precise talk about different campaigns, equipment, men, German, Japanese, obviously, and American, and all the different battles that went on to a minuscule amounts, that, information that you never knew, at least I never knew. And what brought me to the attention was when I saw an ad for it, was called the third atomic bomb over Japan. I said, what in hell are they talking about?
I maintain he effed his roomie too.
And it was amazing to find out what they were really talking about, a third atomic bomb, that there was a third atomic bomb ready, headed for Kyoto if it was needed to be dropped. So things of that sort. Anyway, Mark Felton Productions and Mark Felton War Stories on YouTube.
Thank you.
Now, coming out of your neck of the woods, Rich, as well, there was eventually established by the government what they called, you know, an Office of War Information, which some people would say was an office of, you know, war propaganda. Well, whatever you want to call it. So WNYC, which is the public broadcasting channel down out of New York, who I believe, correct me, Rich, if you know otherwise, I think they have a small AM transmitter actually on the top of the Empire State, and they do broadcast FM to Metro New York. They have some pretty neat archives. If you visit their website, not that they play them over the air anymore, but last I had looked, this was a little while ago, they had a whole section of these. The gentleman's name who headed this up for the government was named Elmer Davis. And their Elmer Davis War Correspondence Updates. It's the equivalent of a radio newsreel. And these programs would air. So for anybody like us who's sitting with Ray Chase down at InfoAge and wants to get a real flavor of what was going on through their vintage set, well, you know, it doesn't take a lot to listen to these broadcasts off your computer, plug them into a little AM transmitter and have them come out the other end on your nice Zenith or your Philco there, and get a real flavor for how some of this information was presented to the United States. So some of them are a little crackly, some of them aren't the best recordings. It's great stuff. It's interesting stuff. Is it all 100% the way it happened? Who knows? But it's kind of interesting to see what folks were hearing on the home front on a regular basis. And this type of stuff at least has been preserved for the most part. And WNYC does it down there. So I spoke to one of the gentlemen down at WNYC who said, you know, it was a little bit of a project for them to get the permissions to have and to actually save these things and to let people visit and listen to them. I played one once over the air and had to kind of jump through a few hoops to do it. But it was very interesting stuff to listen to Elmer Davis and the Office of War Propaganda give these presentations. So Feel free to check those out. Anybody who's interested in getting a little vintage content for your radio. Anybody else have anything to chime in with for Lisa or the Negras?
I found the picture of, I don't know, can you see that? No, maybe not.
There we go. If you pull it away, there we go.
There's Mom at 101.
That's
all
awesome.
right.
She looks pretty good for 101, don't you think?
She sure does.
Well, she looks better than I do in the morning, I'll tell you that.
Good at 80.
Paul, you did mention along the way that if my mother wanted to join us, she was welcome. And I did speak with her about it. I don't want you to think I forgot about it.
Oh, no. I understand completely. At that stage of the game, she can do whatever she likes.
But she can't hear very well, okay? And she won't use her hearing aids because she said she doesn't like changing the battery.
Yeah, well, I know too much about this already, so.
Yeah. But if she was on right now, usually she'll answer to a question that you didn't even ask. That's number one. Number two, she probably wouldn't hear the question too well. So I would.
Well, you take the answers and enjoy them.
I did pursue it, though. I wanted to.
We will.
Thank you.
We'll play her back the
tape.
The tape.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have to apologize. I have it fully recorded, of course. I will post it, but in the middle of Lisa's last response, I lost my internet connection. Froze. I probably had a quality of service issue, and actually bumped me out of the Zoom meeting, but I recovered. So I have a brief period, and unfortunately, to my dismay, was Lisa's response. I lost probably about 30 seconds to 45 seconds, but it's only a small piece. So I can only blame technology, because I can assure you my analog radios would have never skipped a beat.
That's right.
Never.
That's right. Now, one thing you guys should look in at is actually getting for the Negra household, the Philco with the particular model number that your mom had, which, by the way, was probably one of the last of the pre-war models manufactured, as radio went to war in 42, and you could not buy a consumer radio until 1946. So Philco went to war along with Zenith and RCA and a lot of other companies.
I wish we still had it. I really do.
Well, you know what? I bet you a guy like Rich Lee could ask around and find somebody down his way
Okay,
who
Rich.
might be able to point you in the right direction.
Here's your action item, Rich.
How many do you need?
Do you have
see,
one,
we
Nick?
just put it all on him,
I'm
he
sure we
visits us
do.
and we give him all these jobs. It's brutal. He'll never come back.
Good. Thank you,
Anyway.
Rich.
But also, Rich, I apologize. In my trying to get the meeting organized, I forgot to CC you in the Zoom link, and we're 10 minutes into it, I realized, let me just send this to Rich, and that's why Rich joined late. You can blame me.
No worries. No worries.
No, thank you.
We'll
very
blame
much.
him completely. We'll blame Rich anyway. So I mean,
Exactly. I was late. Anyway,
he's the president of a radio club. That's what everybody does to him anyway, for anything they don't like, right?
we have a Zoom meeting in the
bad
in
weather.
anyway.
I didn't get the right price for my radio at the swap meet. It's all Rich Lee's fault. So.
That happens. Yeah.
It's supposed to snow tomorrow. Poor Rich.
Listen,
Well, in any event.
I'd like to say something that was brought up also.
Sure.
It's very scary, and it's something I deal with, and you all deal with also. I'm looking at these Hollywood squares here, and I see Lisa Spahr, who's about the only person I see with dark hair, and who's probably under 50. And we have that problem. All of us, our clubs, have that problem. Where is this going? Where are we stepping off? Let alone our stuff. All right, our stuff is out there. A lot of it is going to be junk. Some of it will be museum quality and saved. But what about our history? What about all the technology, the old technology? Where's it going to go?
Yeah.
Is it going to end up in the dumpster? Yeah, so much of it will end up in the dumpster. And it's so important that we, as groups, try and get the younger people involved. We opened up last year our club to ham radio operators, because one of the reasons being that probably 40 or 50% of our membership are ham radio operators, be it that they've shelved their license or not involved that much anymore. And we revived a whole aspect of radio, okay? We didn't want to go to just anything electronic. I can understand why, but some clubs have, as NEVIC has, I understand that. But we wanted to try and stay with radio as much as possible, knowing that we do have so many operators, amateur radio operators. We've also tried to get more people, younger people in via audio, because audio is a big thing, be it simple radio, radio phonos, 45
Sure.
players,
Component stereo.
component stereo, anything that will get the younger people in. Vinyl.
Yep.
Oh, look at this
Yep.
vinyl. Oh, whoa, whoa, what are these? Oh, that's amazing. Okay, great. I'm glad you enjoy it, and we do too. And it's coming back. It's been coming back for a long time. Anything that gets us in with younger people that have dark hair and hair, as most of us don't.
Well, let's not talk about the hats, why I'm wearing hats. So, but one thing, Rich, I will mention, and it can be a hard nut to crack. It's one of these things that, I've spoken to a couple of folks up here. There's a fellow who runs the Mass Broadcasters Hall of Fame, who's been less than forthcoming in dealing with me. I have no idea, being such a charming, jovial, and avuncular young man that I am. He kind of ignores me. The California Club, however, has made a nice connection with folks who have retired from radio, and in some cases this is radio icon 60s, 70s, and 80s out in the Bay Area. Invite them in to their meetings to give talks about their programs. They've put together a vintage radio studio, something a DJ would sit in, as the guys down in the Alabama Club have as well. And it seems to be, at one point I saw a kid, he was only 20 or so, and he's out at the California Club working in the restoration shop. So, amazing stuff, but not in the numbers that we need to keep the ball rolling forward.
When we get a younger member, 30s, well, that's like amazing, whatever you want, you got. You do anything you want. Oscilloscopes, you got them. Books, you got them. Whatever you want, we will be your mentor, your Elmer. You've got it. And please, the rest of us, we all have to do the same.
Yeah, and we've it's a good time, for anybody who was remotely interested in this stuff to get involved. I mean, I've been fortunate in that I've had a lot of very kind older folks help me by giving me something that was better than I had asked them for at a better price, or showing me something I never knew existed. And I think there are more and more of us who are willing to do that. So maybe that's we'll have our national leadership meeting for the radio clubs of America, and we'll hash all that out. But no, I mean, your point is well taken. It's something we all struggle with, and it not only relates to our hobby, but it unfortunately relates to history behind the year 2000.
Well, the guy that we met, we were interviewed by Mark White from the Mark White radio show in Alabama. He's 41.
Oh, yay.
And his radio show is all about doing good deeds. Anybody wants anything out there on the waves, let me know. I will send it to Mark. He happened to just see me in comments. Somebody posted on a website that they were going to, they were selling copies of letters from like George Washington and, Ben Franklin, and, buy these for $49.99. And I just clicked on there and I put a comment down and I said, we have real letters. Check out my husband's website. So,
there you go.
Anyway, Mark from the Mark White Show saw my comment, jumped on Ron's website, messaged Ron and said, I love, what this book is about. I love radio. I love, I love the shortwave aspect of it. I love the letters. Can I call and interview you? And we thought, sure, well, he did it the next day and we were on the radio in Alabama, 2 days later. So,
well, I'll give you some contact information. Have him call the radio club down there in Alabama. They have some neat guys who he'd love to talk to, but we'll take care of that a little bit later on.
Yeah, give me the information and anything you want out there on the waves. He's happy to put them.
Well, I have a feeling it may not be the last time we ever communicate, Val, so I wouldn't worry. I'll be in touch. And it's 8:25, so if we don't have any other further comments, reactions, questions, it's about time for us to click the recording button to close and wind up tonight's show. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming back, and Ron and Val for being on.
Always a
It's a
pleasure.
great way to kick off the year.
Thank
So,
you.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah,
Happy
thank you,
New
everybody.
Stay in
Year.
touch.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
very
for
much.
Take
attending.
care.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year's.
Good
Take
night, all.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care of
Thanks.
yourselves. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
folks, for coming on.
Okay.
All right. Then bye-bye.